answer. Hi, Harv. To sort of express at the end of the year a feeling of gratitude and appreciation, and without dwelling on it, because Effie would yell at me for not getting to Torah, but okay. But I have been teaching as a rabbi since 1955, and I have never had a group as committed, intelligent, informed. You are unique in my life. And I just thought I'd say that before I start crying and stuff. But thank you. Thank you for the year that passed, and thank you for the year that's coming. And please don't consider yourselves ordinary, because in my experience, for better and for worse, you are far from ordinary. And I love you for that. So, okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, well, once a year, it's my day to be nice. Once a year. Okay.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom, and
Shabbat shalom.
yeah, and it's just so great to be with you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu la'asok
b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Okay, we begin with an acknowledgement that one of the most powerful religious leaders in the world died. Pope Emeritus Benedict died this morning, and we express our condolences to the Catholic world on its loss. And the world has lost a great religious leader, controversial, but a powerful, important leader, and managed to survive being Pope Emeritus when that kind of a thing. I mean, it's bad enough when you have a retired rabbi hanging around the congregation, but when you have a retired Pope hanging around the congregation, that could be difficult. And there were a few slips, but did a great job. And then, so may his soul find blessing. And then just to mention, because this is, Risa and I were talking, it's really personal. Barbara Walters died. And I can't say that Barbara was a friend of ours. She was an acquaintance of ours. And she once participated in a major program that I put on at Central. And the most indelible is not the view, which between Risa and me, one of us watched. Besides Risa, hi Maya. Besides that, there was the unforgettable time when I officiated at a wedding at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we were leaving the wedding, and it was kind of like not great New York weather, and this lady said, "Do you mind if we share a cab?" So Barbara Walters got in the cab with us, and we rode through town together. And yeah, okay, I'm a groupie, and she probably, well, she might have remembered me because I did the wedding, but there we were driving to Manhattan with Barbara Walters. Is that a New York story or what?
For real.
Is it or what? Okay, and
What a career she had.
yeah, and
Next time I see you, Rabbi, I want to touch you.
go. Yeah, I'll see you in the morning. Okay, so happier secular New Year tonight, or I did from one of you, no names, receive an email Christmas Eve, I am eating in a Chinese restaurant. I thought you'd want to know. That was just good. If I look back on my career, that may be one of the most important teachings I shared with anyone. So that
We had Chinese takeout.
Okay, we had takeout as well. We didn't stay in the restaurant. We had takeout. So we had microwavable Chinese food for.
Yummy, sounds good.
Yeah, it was good. Now, I put together this past Thursday evening, Friday on the Facebook, YouTube posting some conversation about hope and optimism. And it certainly dealt with the Sedra, absolutely dealt with the Sedra, which is Vayigash, Genesis 45. Well, we'll be at 45:1 and following. And part of that conversation, and I want to just ask you to participate briefly. First of all, knowing that I was going into the conversation, I sought out help from Tamara, and she shared a Heschel quote with me about optimism. And so, B'Shem Omro, quoting the quoter, Heschel said, "I am an optimist against my better judgment." And I have been thinking about that for the past 3 days. Think about that quote. I am an optimist against my better judgment. It just doesn't matter whether or not the world looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket. I choose, he said, to be an optimist, even though all signs would indicate I should head in the opposite direction. That's a great line. I am an optimist against my better judgment. So here, for 2 minutes, just for 2 minutes, please explain to me the difference between optimism and hope. Okay? What is the difference between optimism and hope? Brief comments, just any way you'd like to do it. Optimism and hope. How do you, Steve Miller? Okay.
I think hope is much more a matter of faith, whereas optimism has some grounding in fact or experience.
Thank you. I mean, that's exactly how I'd like to approach this. Thank you for that. Hi, Karen Sarachik. Anyone else? Hope and optimism. How do you sense the difference? Okay, I see Arthur.
Hope is out of me, but optimism is in me. That is the difference.
Please explain hope is outside of me.
There is some events is happening and I do not know what is going on. I hope within myself that this course of action would happen. But optimism, this is I who have control of, think this would happen this way.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Hope and optimism. Anyone else on how you separate or should separate hope and optimism? Any other thoughts? Okay, I see Susie. We'll stop with Susie. Okay, Susie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Good to see you again, Rabbi. I might be the only one, but I think optimism and hope. When I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful. When I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. They're so close. I almost think they're the same thing.
Beautiful. Thank you, Susie.
You're welcome.
Howard.
I think the national turkey just before Thanksgiving has hope before being pardoned, and all the other turkeys have optimism.
We're going to stop with that. Okay. You win. Okay. You win. And thank you. I will never look at the national turkey the same way again. Calendar. Next week, we have a siyum. And the Siyum is to mark the close of the study of the book of Genesis for this Jewish year. And of course, since we are not together, I'm going to ask you all to set up maybe crudité. Is that a fancy word, crudité? I used to say chopped vegetables, but now crudité. And, you know, a little bit of herring, Cindy, there you go. And maybe a little slivovitz, but have a little bit of something so that next week when we finish this year's study of Genesis, we can party individually but collectively. That's next week, Siyum.
What's the date?
Pardon?
What's the date?
The 4th. Is that right? No, that's not right at all. What's the date? I don't know.
7.
7?
7.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I should know that because apparently a member of my family is having a bat mitzvah the next week. My youngest grandchild is having her bat mitzvah, and that means I am aging. It's all about me, right? I mean, that's the way the world is. I am aging rapidly. My youngest is now going to be bat mitzvah. Wow. And of course, it reminded me once when son Ron was a teenager and being a teenager in religious school in my synagogue, and he was a little bit rowdy with another student, and the teacher came and reported him to me. And so I called Ron in and said, hey, you know, what's going on? And my son, who was destined to be a lawyer, said to me, I just want to know if you're speaking to the other kids' parents. If you're not speaking to the other kids' parents, don't talk to me.
Whoa.
Okay, so that was cool. And now Hannah, poor Hannah, is studying for her bat mitzvah. And Don Gurney reports about her to me every week. And I tell Hannah, and I'm not quite sure that she appreciates being monitored that closely. But there you go. On the 11th and 25th, we have our next current event classes. The last current event class was, in my mind, really interesting, really challenging. And for the first time, I got a few emails challenging, questioning, asking for more information, everything that I would want. So if you have a chance to speak to neighbors, if you talk to your neighbors, mention the 11th and 25th current events. We'd love to have them join us. That would be wonderful. The class deserves a broader impact. Checking in. I did my check-in with Hannah's bat mitzvah. Any checking in, things going on in your lives? Like Maya, how much time do you have left on your vacation? How much time do you have left on your vacation? Say something.
I leave the morning of the 7th, so I'm going to be on a plane during Chevra Torah.
That's not acceptable. Change your flight. Okay. Any other checking in? Anything else happening in your lives? We have Merle and Sedona. Fine. Let's go forward.
Well, may I say something, please?
Who's there?
Donna.
Donna.
I got a beautiful greeting card from Joe and Jill again, and they mentioned my family and said that this year was going to be a blessed year for me, and I'm excited. That's all I'm going to say.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. 45:1, Genesis 45:1 in the Plout 289, Women of Reformed Judaism 263. These are famous lines. There's certain lines in the study of Torah that just remain with you. I mean, all Torah is important, but V'lo yachol Yosef lehitapek. Joseph was not able to restrain himself, is the translation. And that just kind of, it's one of those really long-standing quotes. But I ask you, it says, "V'lo yachol Yosef litapek l'chol nitavim alav." Joseph was not able to restrain himself. The translation says, before all who were standing in attendance on him. And then he kicks everybody out. What was Joseph's problem? Why wasn't he able to hit tapek? Why wasn't he able to restrain himself? Put it differently, some strong stuff was bothering Joseph. What was bothering Joseph? Open to thought. Cindy.
He saw his brothers who tried to kill him.
That would do it, right? Yeah, okay. He saw his brothers who tried to kill him. Please go on, Steve. And then
I think he was reluctant in front of all of his non-relatives to expose where he came from by acknowledging the rest of his family.
Okay, so here you have a thing. He didn't. Remember, Pharaoh gave him a new name, Safnat Paneach, and he gave him a wife, and he did a whole thing. He made him Egyptian. And this event is making him, can I say it, less Egyptian? And that was something that troubled him. Okay, Arthur.
Yes, that, as you said, that was the problem within himself, to see his identity, what it was, and what it is now, and what it's going to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. So here, the struggle isn't, I'm worried what those people will say. Oh my God, who am I? Am I of them, or am I of my brothers, my father, my people? And that struggle had been pushed aside. And now the struggle bursts forth. Okay, Effie, then Donna.
I can't decide if he cried for happiness or sadness. Happiness that he sees his brothers for the first time in all those years, and sadness remembering what his brothers did to him.
That's great. In other words, don't assume that the tears are tears of sorrow. He broke out in screaming tears. It could be, oh my God, how did this finally happen after all these years? Okay, that's terrific. Donna.
I can relate to this. I'll just be very private. In 31 years, I've seen my family. And I can tell you that it's tears of joy, gratitude, and also overwhelming emotion to see your loved ones that you love and miss. And I will be right, but it's just, it's going to be okay. But I can relate to this.
That's great. I mean, I think many of us have had that kind of experience. Okay, so what was Penina, Ken?
I always thought about the fact that he never told his dad that he's alive. So I think he didn't even know. So here was his chance to find out what's going on back home. And I'm still struggling with this thing that how come he never let his dad know that he's alive?
Yeah, we're gonna definitely get to that. But your words gave me the image of a jigsaw puzzle, and you got to put those last pieces in to make it work. And part of that is whatever happened to Dad, my family, the home, the country. Yes, great. So what was making Joseph so uncomfortable? His secret. I put in something else too. It's just because, I was feeling nasty. Joseph looked at his brothers. Am I going to kill them or hug them? That he couldn't. He was immediately torn between forgiveness and the desire for immediate revenge. He looked at these people. These are my brothers. I hate them. And the duality of his emotions. By the way, I threw in another one. His fear of Pharaoh. Why would he fear Pharaoh? Why would he fear Pharaoh? Penina? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Right. I think because Jacob was the head of a tribe, it was kind of like a royalty, this whole dynasty of Abraham and people that came from Ur Kasdim, this new Hebrew thing. And now Joseph is a part of them, and that's like royalty to royalty. So I'm really thinking that he was afraid that Pharaoh is going to actually try to maybe hurt them, because it's like a rivalry type of thing, as far as monarchy, or as far as being in charge of or in command of another nation.
I think that that's a really interesting insight. I'm reminded that when the other Pharaoh, I think the other Pharaoh, we don't really know for sure, the other Pharaoh looks at the growing number of the family of the Israelites and says, maybe they will join with others and turn against us. It's the same kind of a feeling. They represented a border of Egypt and therefore could be threatening. Perfect. Thank you, Arthur.
He was afraid that Pharaoh would find out that he had deceived him by not revealing who his identity was.
Okay, to an extent, Arthur, I think Pharaoh knew based upon his imprisonment and so forth. I'm not sure that Pharaoh was totally surprised, but in the real world, if the Egyptians out there distrust this foreigner now, they thought he was Safnat Paneach. They didn't read the Cairo Times and figure out who this Joseph was. He was an Egyptian. He was second to Pharaoh. He did his stuff. If they find out that this guy who was buying up their land and making life weird for them is a foreigner, they could turn on Joseph. And if they turn on Joseph, they could turn on Pharaoh because he was second to Pharaoh. So yes, I mean, when you look at the simple line, Joseph wasn't able to restrain himself. There was a lot going on. There was a lot. Okay, now I didn't know this next part, which is the fun part of preparing for class. The Hebrew is kind of strange. Joseph could no longer restrain himself before all who were standing in attendance on him. Hebrew says, Nitzavim, standing on him. Why were all these people standing before Joseph? Why? One of the commentators, God love him, said they were all there pleading for Joseph to forgive Benjamin. Joseph, forgive your brother. And they were creating pressure on him. And they were, you can see them marching in the palace, free Benjamin, are you not your brothers, whatever. And Joseph was just overwhelmed by the demand of the Egyptians that he free his brother. I can't validate that, but one of the commentators said that, and it's kind of interesting. My last part, what was Joseph afraid of? Do we agree that Joseph came from a dysfunctional family? Do we agree that Joseph and his brothers had a degree of bad relations or a little bit of bitter history?
Yes.
The Egyptians could say, this guy comes from a screwed up family background. Tomorrow, he could turn on Pharaoh the way his brothers turned on him. All of these things, we don't know, but they fear Joseph's stability and reliability. Joseph simply couldn't stand being in the presence of so many people who could be threatening to him or judging him. He kicked them out. Okay, now I saw a hand. I'm sorry, I did see a hand. I see Lynn entering the room. That's great. Welcome, welcome. I saw a hand. The hand went away. Okay, I respect that. Okay, fine. Now, Joseph couldn't restrain himself, and he called out, "Kick all these people out." And nobody stood with Joseph. Behit vada Yosef el achav. And I like the Hebrew word behit vada. It's the root is Yodea, right? Yodea. Joseph didn't just, hey guys, I'm Joseph. Hitvada. He made himself known to his brothers. He made himself known. It was more than just exchanging identity cards. At this moment, Joseph revealed his inner self to his brothers. So I like that. Any comment? We're gonna move forward now. He gave voice. Joseph gave voice to a loud wail. Wail. The Hebrew says "bechi," cry. A wail. Fine. He gave a voice to a cry, a wail, and all of Egypt heard, and all of the palace heard. Is that possible? What are we talking about? What does it mean, all of Egypt heard, or the palace heard? What does it mean?
Word spread.
I'll buy that right there. It didn't take long for the word to bounce. Lorraine?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Rabbi, I had a question from I entered the study group a little bit later, so excuse me if I missed the part that where you were talking about Joseph having a conflicted feelings between hating his brothers and loving his brothers, if I capture that correctly. But
yeah,
then when we look
revenge and
right, but then when we see this part where he's overcome with emotion, it seems like it speaks about the love that he has for his family and his brothers, and also in other actions that he took, sending the caravan and all the gifts to his dad and his family, bring them over. So in what part of the text are we able to capture that he has feelings of revenge? Because I may have missed that part.
No, well, one of the things that, Lorraine, thank you for that. One of the things we know is that the brothers certainly thought so. The brothers certainly thought that he would be interested in revenge. And it got to the point, if you remember, right at the end of the book of Genesis, they come to Joseph after Jacob died and said, "Oh, Joseph, in case you hadn't heard, Dad said, don't forget to love us." Well, Dad in Genesis never said that. Where is the fear of revenge? It's in the atmosphere. It's possible. That's all. There is no text that says Joseph plotted an evil revenge. But the situation certainly makes that a possibility. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Penina. Not hearing you, Penina.
Okay. They never mentioned Benjamin. He had to tell them later that they have a brother, a young brother, blah, 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 and bring him back. So I think he was also afraid that they did to Benjamin what they did to him. There was a lot of, the subject of Benjamin came later, not right away. So he had to ask for them to bring him.
I think that you go back all the way back to the competition among the children of the 4 wives.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure that they changed, that they didn't do to him the same thing to Benjamin what they did to him.
Yes, yes. Let's go forward. Now here in verse 3, and again, this is a world famous quote. Joseph says to his brothers, Ani Yosef ha'od Avichai. I'm Joseph. Is dad still alive? And the commentators do what you were doing a little while ago. Now you're worried about dad? Oh, that's really nice. Now, you were second in command to Pharaoh. You had power and influence, wealth and reach. You could have found out about this dude, Jacob, back in Canaan. Did you? No. Why not? By the way, unanswered question. It's a question that doesn't sit with an answer. You could, you didn't, why not? Ani Yosef, and he says, not just Ani Yosef, ha'od avi chai. Is dad still alive? It is an unanswerable question. Why Joseph could sit with capacity, agency in Egypt and not check on his father. But now all of a sudden he's the dutiful son. I see Eric, I see Effie. Eric? I can't hear you.
Muted.
Okay. Not hearing you. Eric, not hearing you. Okay, Eric, not hearing you. Effie?
My translation says, doth my father live? So it's my father. He didn't say dad. Dad includes everybody. He just, why my father? He didn't say,
right.
Why didn't he say our father?
Our Father.
Ask him. That is a great question.
Joseph.
Yosef. Yosef. My father?
Our Father.
Our father. He was not yet identifying with his brothers as brother. I mean, it's new. Give him a little bit of space. We got that. Okay. Eric, do you have the sound up now? Before your sound was gone. Okay, I'm sorry. I have no Eric voice. I see Joy. Joy?
Yes. I think that, like, looking at Joseph's story, a lot of what he went through included his physical body. And so from the being thrown in the pit, what was done to his coat, in a way, almost being like physically assaulted by Potiphar's wife, and then going to prison. So there was a lot of, I think, embodied, from a 2022 lens, an embodied like experience of trauma, which there's definitely precedent to suggest that people can get stuck at the age where they experience the trauma. And so the first time that he's really, in a way, robbed of power is when he's like, sold, and he kind of gets stuck there, in my mind at least. And so even though he has a superficial experience of authority now in being second in command, he's not able to enact that in a way that could mean reaching out to his dad or seeing about his dad. And so when the brothers are there again and he has this loud cry, he lets it all out, it's in a similar context to the first time he experienced that trauma. And it's everything that perhaps he would have done if he wasn't maybe stifled in a way, he does immediately. And so he lets it out and he does it immediately, in a way, almost, I guess, regaining his power. And he just says, "Where's my father?" Because that's like the most important thing to him. And he uses that bit of power almost immediately.
Joy, thank you. Thank you. It is a different way for me to look at the text. Thank you. He was stuck in time, stuck at the time of the trauma. Yeah, I know it's 2022 language. It doesn't make it not real. And I think the concept is just power. I like it. He was stuck. At that moment, he was back in the pit, and it was my father, and that's what burst out of him. Thank you. Oh, I'm holding off because I really thank you. Okay, that was super. Eric, can I hear you now? No, Eric, no sound. No sound. I'm sorry. No sound. Arthur?
As I said last week, although Torah is the story of human civilization, we should not pinpoint in this very small matter. This small matter may be the crucial and maybe not. If you see the story of slavery is not as we think it happened in the movie of Gone with the Wind. The story of the slavery is serfdom, is peasantry. This is that the Israelites were not captivated in each Egyptian home. Why do I say that? Because God asked you borrow silver and gold from your neighbors. What kind of slavery is it? That the slave has the reputation or the credit that the neighbor give them gold. You need to look at this in a broader spectrum and see it as a history of human civilization, not only an Israelite. Pay attention to this more deeply, please.
Hello? The word that comes...
Can you hear me now? Can you
yes,
hear
I
me?
can. Eric, hold a second. Yes, I can hear you. Yes. Hold 1 second. Arthur.
Yes.
The word that popped to mind for me was paradigmatic. That what you're saying is these kind of events are not just events caught in one moment in time. They speak to the nature of human relationships. They speak...
Absolutely.
Okay, so every once in a while I understand something. So that, Arthur, helps explain why this story, the drama of Joseph and his family, keeps its power because it is paradigmatic. It is a model for what happens in the real world. It's
yes,
not
it is.
It's not just Joseph who can't hold himself back. It's not just Joseph who is stuck joy in time. It's not just Joseph who's locked into the event. We are that way. The question I would ask you, have you ever not been thrust back into something that happened 40 years ago and something triggers, and for that moment, you are that person 40 years ago, not the person of today. You're doing great, folks. You're doing great. Before Merle, I'm going to go to Eric.
I think he had post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's like when he sees something, I have post-traumatic stress syndrome. Whenever I see a person with Alzheimer's, I remember what happened to my father, and I get sad and everything like that. And I have another quick Rashi on Genesis 4:5. They said, "Come forward to me." He saw that they recoiled, and he said to himself, "Now my brothers feel ashamed." The brothers were feeling ashamed that they put him in the pit and subjected him to these travails. So the brothers were scared that they did Joseph wrong by Rashi, according to what I heard in the Torah class at Central Synagogue this morning.
Okay, even though you got it from a foreign source, it sounds very good. It sounds very good, Eric. Yes. We're doing well. I had Merle, yes.
So, what Joy said about being stuck in time and how this is a model for the real world, which I think you just said. When I was 2 years old, my mother kicked my biological father out of the house. And when he tried to find me when I was 63 and found me, it brought back to me all the things that I had been told he did. And he brought back to me all these things by making accusations about other family members, including the man who had become my stepfather, who was my father. And all of these things hit me, and not just emotionally, but I really rejected him in a very probably inappropriate way. But my comment was, when I finally talked to him, was, "Why are you calling me? What do you want from me?" And, he wanted to apologize before he passed away for what he had done or been accused of doing. And I can totally get this stuck in time thing and a model for the real world, because it really happens. And it's not just a story that we read about, because we can relate to this. So many of us can relate to this. He passed away several years ago, but I still remember those moments. And at the time, I was very mad at Arnie and our daughter, who said, "You really need to touch base with him," mostly about health issues. And I did it, but I never forgave myself for doing it.
My only comment that I would dare to make is thank you for trusting us.
I do. I trust this is, the Wilshire Boulevard Temple family has always been my family. And you're all a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, whoa, okay, yes. Ani Yosef Ha'od Avichai. Now forever I will picture Joseph thrust back in time. Daddy, where are you? Okay, yes. No, they couldn't answer. They couldn't answer him. They were, the word fear, I don't know. Nivhalu is more than fear. Tamara, can you give me a better word? Fear doesn't, they were astonished, they were thrown for a loop, they were I think the best translation here would be gobsmacked, but I don't think they would put that into the text. It was like, it's more than fear. It's more pachad, yareh. It would be fear. They were just overwhelmed. It was way too much. Way too much. Okay, this is great stuff. Vayomer Yosef alachav, and now Joseph says to his brothers, hey guys, draw near to me. Vayigashu, and they drew near. Do you know what Joseph was doing when he asked them to draw near? Rashi knew. He said, guys, come here. Let me show you something. And he showed them that he was circumcised. I'm going to have to leave that right where I put it and move on from there. But I don't know. No wonder he drove all the Egyptians out of the room. But okay, that's what Rashi said. Joseph said to them, hey guys, I got a little secret. Oh, forgive me. He's a ruler. I got a big secret. And he shows them that he's one of the tribe, right? He shows them that I'm really Joseph. Okay, all right, we'll let that go. This class has ups and downs, right? And Ani Yosef Achichem, I am Joseph, your brother. And now what did he say? Asher Mechartem Oti Mitzrayma, whom you've sold to Egypt. Folks, tell me what that phrase means in context. Whom you sold to Egypt. What does that mean? What's going on? What does that phrase mean to Joseph? I am Joseph. Look at my circumcision. You sold me to Egypt. What's he doing? What's happening? What's the dynamic?
He's shaming them.
I think that's one possibility. Yes? So you're viewing whom you sold to Egypt aggressively, right? Hey, I'm the guy you did it to, Steve Miller.
In some ways, I actually think he's trying to gain their trust. He can see they're afraid. He's by now decided he's not going to kill them. And, you know, regardless of how close he's going to get to the family. And I think this is a way of gaining their trust.
Sforno, the commentator Sforno, says other people in the royal household might have known that Joseph was living in Canaan and through bad circumstances ended up in Egypt. But Joseph had never, Sforno said, Joseph had never told anybody that they had sold him. And now Joseph is telling his brothers, you know how I can prove that I'm your brother? I know that you sold me. I know the story. It's almost, well, let go. Joy?
Yes. It's exactly what you've just said. And also in terms of the circumcision, that's another moment where he, I guess, now processes everything that's happening through his body again. And so it started with a lot of things happening with his body. It ends in a way with him processing it through his body and saying, this is like almost like letting it out. And in terms of saying, you know, who you sold, I think fear is a great word, but the word that came to mind for me is dissonance. And so, you know, in your mind that, there's a version of the truth, but then there's like a feeling of not wanting to accept that. So there are conflicting ideas in like the same person. And so I think the brothers might have been dissonant in a way. And him saying who you sold is a clear establishment of events and saying, this is exactly what happened. There's no two versions about it. I'm the person and this is what happened. And if we're going to move forward, we need to do that from a place. It's exactly what like we just talked about. And so having a clear, like going back to a family member and just having a clear understanding of what happened, and letting that be the foundation to move forward is from a place where we've established everything that happened in the proper way that it happened.
You can just imagine, thank you, Joy, you can just imagine that over the years, the story lost its edges to the brothers. We threw them in a pit and then these guys came and we just gave them over and, they softened the edges of what happened. And Joseph is saying, folks, I lived this. You physically sold me like a chair into slavery in Egypt. So part of whom you sold to Egypt is a way of identifying himself. Clearly, I know what you did to me. Part of it, folks, let's know what we're talking about. It wasn't a family spat. You physically sold my life. That I made something out of it was not in your plan. You sold me. I want to acknowledge it even as we move to a better relationship. Is there something to reconciliation? What was it they called in South Africa? It was something in reconciliation, something, anyone remember the process? It was
peace and reconciliation, according to Mona.
Peace and reconciliation, truth and before you can reconcile, the truth has to be in front of you. Okay? Sukasa.
If you take the story at face value, the way it says, you could say that Joseph was very resentful of his brothers for what they did, but then he realizes that he had a higher purpose in that he was going to protect everybody from famine. So in a sense, it sounds to me, on the surface at least, that he's forgiving them for what they did to him because he sees that he has a higher purpose. And I think sometimes when bad things happen to us, it can lead us to change ourselves and realize that while it may not be a good thing that it happened, it makes us a better person in many ways. Period.
No, I was just, I was saying to myself yes and no, which is pretty confusing. This was stage 2. First stage, let me tell you what actually happened. Second stage, but I didn't get trapped there, and maybe you guys shouldn't either. I hear you, Sue. I hear you. Okay, Cindy.
I understand his dress was different and they didn't expect to see him, but what is the time frame between seeing his brothers that none of them recognized him?
My grandson came home from college with a beard. That's almost my answer. The rabbi's comment on your question Why didn't they recognize him? First of all, he was speaking a strange language. Okay, but that was a deal. The second part was they said he'd grown a beard. He looked Egyptian. Third thing, try this, Cindy. Sometimes, I'm going to say a piece of wisdom. I'm so proud. Sometimes we see what we expect to see. And we don't see otherwise. They came to the throne room and they expected to see an Egyptian noble. So whom did they see? An Egyptian noble. Sometimes we see what we expect to see. And the flip of that is when we're looking at something we didn't expect to see, we may not see it. I don't think it's a shock that the brothers didn't recognize Joseph. I would suspect that Joseph's recognition of his brothers had as much to do with their telling him about their life and he realizing that they were his brothers, as opposed to, hey, dudes, it's been 30 years, but you look the same. I think.
Was it a long time?
Yeah, it was a period. Yes, it was a long time. And that's all. But I love my comment based on your question. We see what we expect to see. Risa and I had a mild kerfuffle. A few days ago, she was watching an old-timey movie. No, she was watching a new movie with an old-timey actress. Julia, who was it? Who was it?
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. And Risa said to me, she hasn't aged well. Am I quoting you accurately? Yeah. And I said to her, she's beautiful. And Risa said, no, she's aging poorly. And I rose up in wrath and said, she's gorgeous. We were not seeing what was in front of us. And of course, Risa was wrong. We're going to have to run fast. Effie, Mara, and Panina, and we're going to have to be done.
Okay, at the end of verse 5, it says, because to preserve life did God send me before you.
Right.
So he's saying that it was God's will that they did all of this, so he could help.
This reflects Joseph's growth, Effie, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it reflects his growth. And it was also part of the reconciliation. He took a piece of the guilt and responsibility off their shoulders. Thank you. Mara Harv?
So I think it's interesting that the text says, come near me, I am your brother, as opposed to, I am your brother, come near me. In that, in order to communicate, in order to understand each other and have compassion for each other, we must really be near each other. And I think if you take that further, in order to understand what God wants of us, we need to come near first before we can understand who we are.
Wow. Beautiful. It's a shame we didn't record this for eternity. I think, Mara, today they would say, to really understand someone, you have to really be in their presence. Okay, is that not, I mean, that's today talk, but you have to be in their presence. Come come near, then I can say my truth. Let's be in each. I love it. Okay, Panina, last comment. We did so well. Panina. No, not hearing.
Okay. I think there is a saying that says no en mukdam umeuchar b'Torah. There is no early or late in the Torah. The whole idea here, something happened here that was a lesson to the years to come, to a law later on regarding against slavery. You cannot sell people like animals. They have potentials, they have a soul, they have the understanding. And before you get to know a person, you can treat him just like a thing or an animal. And it became a law later. And that's how the laws developed, from seeing what was negative. And there is a very famous saying that an archaeology used, that the negative of the negative became a positive. Something that was not good to do was not done anymore and became a positive thing. So I think this was a base of the law later on, that you had all kinds of laws regarding the slaves, not to keep them longer than 7 years, to pay them, to treat them as your house family, just like Eliezer, who went to look for Rebecca. He became one of the family. So I think this was one of the examples of what not to do. And that's, I think, sums it up for me.
That's super. We're going to go. Thank you so much for that. We're going to go to Kaddish now. Before we start the Kaddish, just to mention again, my prayers for each and every one of you, that this be a peaceful, healthy, joyous, fulfilling new year, and that we are privileged, I pray, to come together week after week. If we have sessions like we had today, we are going to grow rich of mind. This was terrific. Thank you so much, all of you, for that. We now mention those who have passed away during the past month. Seymour Cantor, Rocio Delgadillo, Charles Dolgender, Roger Ensign, Manley Burton Feinstein, Linda Friedman, Sean Goss, Dorothy Koenig, Ezra Cohn, Stanley Stogel. And the yard sites that occurred during this past week: Annette Abrams, Jack Edelstein, Abram Adler, Sheldon Endelson, Marilyn August, Jackie Banchik, Leonard Baum, Lena Baser, Isidore Bendit, Matthew Burke, Sonia Burson, Refreda Brown, Louise Brunel, Richard Cacciato, Bobby Clare, James Clark, Eva Coden, William Cohn, Sam Cohn, Alfred Coleman, Karen Complin, Ann Kutro, Arnold Daubers, Stuart Davis, Sarah Davis, Susan Dissner, Irene Rose Dunner, Melvin Edelstein, Alon Eliashar, Michael Raymond Faith, Sidney Feldman, Vivian Fern, Ronnie Fink, Bernice Fisher, Sophie Fleischer, Henrietta Fleischer, Philip David Foreman, Flora Fox, Alan Frank, Benjamin Franklin, Ben Freeman, John Freisleben, Marilyn Friedman, Barry Friedman, Julius Friedman, Harry Gilbert, Guilford Glazer, Joseph Carl Gumberg, Lillian Gottstein, Edith Greenberg, Dora Grossflam, Abram Grosser, Maluk Halimi, Joseph Robert Hecht, Eugene Hirsch, Irving Hirsch, Isidore Hone, Betty Eisen, Susan G. Eisenberg, Chava Ish, Rona Jaffe, Stan Kaltman, Ann Kaplowitz, Herman Karp, Esther Kessler, Barbara Kessler, Lee Klein, Mary Cole, Henrietta Culver, Florence Isabel Colwyn, Fega Kostanovich, Lena Laska, Bertha Catherine Levine, Richard Allen Levine, Rosara Liebson, Rose Levin, Helen Levin, Shirley Hausner Levin, Herman Levitt, Joseph Lipsky, Stan Littman, Al Mandel, Lillian Margulis, Ruth Marin, Samuel Morgan, Rose Morhar, Selma Moyer, Dan Newmark, Dora Nordell, Alan Novick, Joyce Austin, Michael Patterson, Louise Perlman, George Piness, Hortense Piness, David Gregerson, Rose Rawich, John Weiss Riskin, Gertrude Rose, Edith Rosenbaum, Nahid, Saidfar Sabit, Beth Lauren Shapira, Lottie Seelman, Charles Sirkin, Estelle Silberkleit, Morton Joseph Sobel, Michael Sokol, Louis Stern Jr., Estelle Wax, Jordan Weber, Eva Ruth Weissenberg, Rosalie Waldenberg, Joyce Wolf, Virginia Wolf, Yaakov Ben Yitzchak. If there are other names to be remembered now, please speak those names aloud or speak them in your hearts. We also bear in mind all of those who died in defense of the United States, who died in defense of the state of Israel, who died as a result of senseless acts of violence. And we remember as well those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalma, Divrach Yiruteh, V'amlich Malchuteh, V'chayechon, Uv'yomechon, V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, V'agalah, Uv'izman Karev, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach, Li'olam Lolmei Almaya, Yitvarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromach, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei D'Kudshah, Richu, La'elam Min Kol Dirchata V'shirata, Tushbachata Da'amiran Ba'alma, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu Yalkol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom V'romav, Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu Yalkol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. May God, who makes peace in the high places, make peace in our hearts, make peace in our homes, make peace in the household of Israel, make peace among all the families and nations of earth. And
Amen.
Say, Amen.
Amen.
I'm so tempted to say L'Shana Tova, and why not? Happy Sylvester, Happy New Year, all of the very best. Thank you for being you.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.
Shalom, Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy, blessed New Year. See you next year.
Right.
2023.
Hi, Susie.
Hi, Effie. Happy New Year. Hi, Joy.
Happy New Year to you, Susie.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy
I try
New
to
Year,
call you.
everyone.
I try to call you, but I didn't get a hold of you. Can I call you now?
Yeah, sure. Wait 5 minutes. I have to find my phone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.